Josh, what's up, man? This is Matt Flynn, man. Pleasure to talk to you. My mind is always going to go towards the quarterbacks, and we just talked about Haynes King there. But in the summer, you're kind of looking for stories to talk about, but something popped up pretty good. And I'm especially interested in stories about quarterbacks in a positive light and doing things the right way. Lenore Sellers, South Carolina quarterback, who just came on so strong last year. He got a lot of hype going into this year. The story comes out from his dad that he may or may not have turned down $8 million NIL deals to stay there because his dad said, well, we made a commitment. We didn't go there to make a bunch of money. We came there to be a student athlete, win championships, do things the right way. When you saw this story, what is that? Like, as a quarterback who tried to do things the right way, it made me feel awesome, be a fan of this kid. So what do you think about that story and just like the NIL mess when it comes to quarterbacks?
I'm glad it came out. They were talking about that on campus this spring when I was up there. And, it's his personal business, so it's his story to tell. I'm not, when I'm privy to that stuff, like I'm not some newsbreaker, but I said, well, why don't you tell that story? That story, it's not braggadocious to tell that story. It really helps the overall sport to tell that story. I'll tell you another one that's done that is Rocco Beck up at Iowa State. That kid could have made 3 times what he's making in Ames, Iowa to leave the past 2 years, by the way, and he stayed there. Now, you can say what you just said, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. Like, that right there is a glaring example of what's good and what should, as Meemaw would say. But also, think about how that perspective ends up working. You've got what I always call penny-wise, pound-foolish approaches to college football, and that is, this guy's offering me more, I'm going over there. And it just, maybe to like a fan, that makes sense. Oh, that guy's got to go get his money while he can. No, it oftentimes doesn't even make sense in that vein, because at the expense of your development, your progression, and your future earnings potential, you're going and chasing $60,000 extra dollars. And that's great in the moment. $60K is not going to matter to you 15, 16 years down the road.
Right.
But yet, having stayed the course, especially at a place that's good for you. If you're in a toxic place, that's different. If you leave a place that's good for you and you're the guy saying, hey, I wanted to stay there, but I had to make a business decision, maybe you just made the wrong business decision. So I'm glad that story went public.
Yeah, it's a great story. And Josh, don't break news here if it's not public info. I was trying to look for it as well, but he gives up $8 million to go. But do you know what his take home is right now with South Carolina?
So it was going to be an $8 million over 2 years. So it was going to be, I think, about a $4 million per year. He's not making that there, but he's making more than half that, I think, there. And South Carolina's a place that they're going to, like most places that know what they're doing, they're going to pay on a scale that is in accordance with performance and real value. And so he's going to make good money there. But also, I want you to pretend you're a major enterprise in the state of South Carolina, and your CEO is a lifelong Gamecock, and he graduated from there. And you listen to that story. If you weren't already on board with underwriting a huge portion of your ad spend this year for Lenore Sellers and South Carolina athletics, now you are. So in just telling the truth and being loyal to a program, he probably made himself even more money and got himself closer to that $4 million per year figure by doing that than he ever needed to by leaving.
That's a great point. I mean,
it is.
You do things the right way, and hopefully it trickles down to other people around the country when they see it. And man, I think, of course, everyone's LSU fans here, but I mean, that's the kind of story where you got a hard time cheering against that kid, at least.
Yeah, I think that as you come out of what we were calling the Wild West era of portal, I think if people handle their revenue sharing the right way, you're going to see a lot of that roster churn slow down, which is a good thing. But I think about, now let's say 10, 15 years from now, we're kind of safely removed from this era, whatever we end up calling this era. And I always think in terms of like a documentary. In the present moment, I think at any given time, what is the documentary 15 years from now saying about this time? And I cannot help but think about, when 30 for 30 came out with the Broke documentary about how many NFL guys squandered their earnings, and they had those guys on camera, and those guys talked about how foolish they were and how they wish they had a do-over. I think 15 years from now, your transfer portal or NIL documentary is going to be pretty heartbreaking, case-by-case scenario, of course, when you have guys on camera who were taken advantage of and had a lot of predatory individuals from the shadows get in their ear and tell them all the wrong things, and they ended up at 3 or 4 different schools, not because they needed to, but just because they could, and they didn't know any better. And now here they are, had all the potential in the world, and they've been done playing football for 13 years by 15 years from now.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. Catching up with Josh Pate here on OTB, talking some college football. I'll stay with quarterback in the SEC because, Josh, for me, one of the storylines that I'm going to find highly intriguing once we get to media days in Atlanta, when you look at the quarterbacks in the SEC, LSU, South Carolina, Florida, OU, Vandy, like they've got quarterbacks that they feel really good about, guys that have done it before, guys that have thrived in college football. But then you look at some of the, normal powers, a UGA, a Tennessee, a Texas, an Ole Miss, an Alabama, and they're going to have first-time starters. Now, it's not to say that they're going to be bad football players. Obviously, Texas, Ole Miss feel really good about their quarterbacks, but how much does that change your outlook on the SEC, knowing that the teams that typically have won the SEC in recent years, made a college football playoff, are hitting reset at quarterback, and some of those other teams feel really good about quarterback?
Well, the added part about that, for context, for people just kind of driving around listening or sitting in the office listening, is you would think with that being the case, the odds would look a little different this year, but they don't. The odds still look pretty much the same. Like no one has any clue what they're going to get from Gunnar Stockton in Georgia, but yet they're right up there along with Texas as the favorites to win the conference. Alabama's right up there. No one knows what to expect from Ty Simpson. And then conversely, you look at DJ Lagway, guy came on really strong at the end of the year. Florida's down the board a little bit, partly due to schedule, but they're down the board a little bit. So it's funny how there's such a benefit of the doubt. There's so much equity built up from some of these power programs. You go beyond the SEC, you could say the same about Ohio State right now. You could say the same about Oregon right now. No one knows what to expect from those QBs, but they're up there anyway. They've earned that benefit of the doubt, and I'm not saying they haven't. But what if, just for a second here, what if you get B-level quarterback play and nothing better, nothing less from those new guys? We did this little exercise on our show the other night. Is I always expect B-level quarterback play from a new guy, and it's not because they're not capable of A-plus level play. It's just that's the exception. That's not the rule. So in order to not let myself down and suffer heartbreak in December, what happens to the rest of your team if Arch Manning plays at a B level? What happens to the rest of my team if the two guys at Bama and Georgia respectively play at a B level? Well, they're still capable if they win their close games and, are plus in the turnover margin. They're still capable of winning the league. But what it does is it opens the door wide for like a Texas A&M to make a run, or like we just said, a South Carolina to make a run. And that normally wouldn't be the case. You'd normally be looking at those caliber rosters saying they're probably another year or two away. And then you could extrapolate that same sentiment nationally. What if none of these guys just elevate themselves? And it really is, a sledgehammer fest come playoff time, and you're looking at it saying, this is just an exception to the rule in terms of the landscape. It really does feel like we're in November, and there are 12 or 15 teams that could win this thing if they get hot in December.
Yeah, it's a good question because any championship team, any good team, your quarterback is going to have a B game, right? You just can't have a B season or you're not going to stand a chance. But every quarter, and so the team's got to overcome those B games. That's why it's the greatest team sport. But, Josh, I want to talk with the expanded playoffs, the opening game has a little bit less impact than it used to on your chances to make the playoffs, make a run. We got 2 SEC teams going on the road. Week 1, big matchups, Texas at Ohio State, of course, LSU at Clemson. What's your opinion of teams like this kind of going out of the ordinary and scheduling these big matchups on the opening game?
Well, I love it independent of anything else because I just think that's what the sport should look like. And I also love those games you're mentioning. They're not these, sanitized neutral site affairs either. It's someone going to someone else's building. That's what this sport is supposed to be. September through November, with very few exceptions. So I love that. Now, the obvious context of that question is, but what if you lose while everyone else is playing a cream puff and it ends up being held against you? Well, that's why I think there's been a lot of talk this past few months, especially about all the playoff stuff, but I don't want to just overlook something else that's being reported, and that is all the talk about recalibrating the selection process and recalibrating the criteria, and specifically recalibrating how they define strength of schedule. And I think that has obviously been born out of folks from the SEC and to an extent the Big Ten, like yelling at the top of their lungs come December and the selection process happens, and they're saying, wait, why do you guys keep talking about records so much? This is college football. Like in the NFL, yeah, you are what your record says you are. That's one of the biggest lies you could tell about college football because of the vast disparity in strength of schedule. So you guys either need to fix this or we're not scheduling these games anymore, because trust us, we can go schedule 4 cream puffs, take the 4-0, and be happy to go into conference play. We want to challenge ourselves. We want to make the money off the gate that we get when we challenge ourselves. We want to offer spectacle for the broadcast networks that we're in media rights deals with, but we're only going to do it if you don't even have to reward us for it, but don't punish us for it. So I still think we're in an era where that's going to change, and I think you'll continue to get those games. But just forget about the playoff for a second. Just college football. I love it. I mean, that's what I'm supposed to be looking forward to this time of year. It's not you playing Alcorn State, all due respect. It's you going on the road to Clemson.
Yeah.
It's Ohio State hosting Texas. It's the, man, what are we going to look like? I remember thinking this about Miami going to Florida last year. And then think about that result. It's just college football is such a wild card sport, but especially week 1 of college football, it's a total roll of the dice, but in like the most fun way possible.
All right, there he is, Josh Pate, good enough to join us. Man, I just got really fired up for football season. I know. We talked about being on the horizon, and it might already be here.
I love your thoughts on the opening week, too.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like, let's go ahead. Let's play a giant. Let's play a Power 4 team. I do not want to play directional school you either as a player. Josh, man, I really appreciate your time. Look forward to our next conversation. Hopefully we can do this again in the near future.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it, guys.